Chapter 1805. From the perspective of the Red Talisman Association, the Blood Ancestor's precious blood clone seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, and the process of its appearance was extremely bizarre. "It's the Blood Ancestor's precious blood clone," Lu Yi replied. "Precious blood clone?" The group of Red Talisman Association cultivators revealed surprised expressions. Those of the blood race who possess divine nature can cultivate a secret technique that allows them to refine their own blood essence and condense precious blood. After further refinement, they can turn into a clone. I believe everyone knows that the Blood Ancestor's shadow was behind the splitting of Fangsuan Mountain. The Blood Ancestor left a drop of his precious blood here, intending to invade the core and take it for himself. After so many years, that drop of blood gave birth to its own intelligence and continued the will of the Blood Ancestor. After listening to Lu Ye's explanation, everyone finally understood the origin of that strange woman. They also finally understood why cultivators would possess divine nature after being bathed in the blood rain of this world. It was because they had been infected by the power of the Blood Ancestor's precious blood. Blazing Heaven had already planned to sacrifice himself in today's battle, because this was the only way to help the precious blood clone descend into the inner world. As for the cultivators of the sacred blood mountain, Blazing Heaven didn't care about their lives at all. Even if they didn't die at the hands of the Red Talisman Association cultivators, the sacred blood mountain's cultivators would be completely slaughtered when the precious blood clone descended. For the precious blood clone, all the first-generation blood race cultivators were nutrients to strengthen herself, and she had an instinctive desire for them. After hearing all this, the group of Red Talisman Association cultivators rejoiced in their hearts. After so many years of perseverance, some of them had been shaken. As members of the Red Talisman Association, they had been hiding here and there like rats. They had to face the suppression of the sacred blood mountain everywhere, and they also lacked cultivation resources. There were always people who betrayed them, but today, they were finally glad that they had persevered. The beliefs that they had pursued for so many years had finally paid off. Otherwise, how could they still be alive? "What's the situation now?" Hu Dequan asked again. "Where is the precious blood clone?" Lu Yi looked in the direction of the origin and said, "She should have gone to invade the origin." Once these words were spoken, everyone's expressions became somewhat grave. Even though they didn't know the mysteries behind it, everyone knew that once the precious blood clone was allowed to infect the source, the world would definitely be turned upside down. They had been fighting against the sacred blood mountain for countless years, and they had barely been able to gain a foothold. However, if their essences were contaminated by the blood progenitor's power, they would have no chance of surviving. Most importantly, they couldn't leave this place at all. In the past, when they were fighting in the Black Abyss, as long as they could hold on long enough, all the invading enemies would be expelled from this space and they would naturally be able to leave. But this time, everyone from St. Blood Peak had died. They didn't see any hope of leaving. Furthermore, with the current situation, they couldn't leave. "What should we do?" Yang Ling asked. Although he didn't know what to do, he couldn't just wait there. Lu Yi shook his head. To be honest, he didn't know what to do now. Previously, he had used the power of the talent tree to help alleviate the corrosion of the origin. Therefore, the talent tree could play a role in the battle between the origin and the Blood Ancestor's power. But the key was that the precious blood clone was too strong. He had managed to preserve his life with great difficulty under Elder Fang's protection, so how could he dare to casually approach it? At that moment, there was a sudden change in the direction of the origin. As the void trembled, red and white lights suddenly bloomed, illuminating the entire space. Everyone turned their heads and looked in that direction. Even though they couldn't see the specific situation over there, they could vaguely infer the advantages and disadvantages of the confrontation just by looking at the changes in the two colors. The white light undoubtedly represented the origin's power, while the red light represented the precious blood clone. This was very easy to distinguish. At that moment, the confrontation over there suddenly entered an extremely intense level. However, what made everyone worried was that the red light clearly had the absolute advantage, and the white light was being eroded by a large amount. Looking from afar, It was like a snow-white canvas being rapidly dyed red. In less than half an hour, there was no longer any white in sight. Instead, it was all red. Everyone's hearts sank to the bottom. However, at that moment, a dazzling white light suddenly seeped out of the red light, which was as dense as blood. It was incomparably bright. Everyone couldn't help but feel excited and expectant. The red and white light intertwined endlessly, and soon, they mixed together and became indistinguishable. Then, the distant light rapidly enlarged in their field of vision. "Why, is it coming toward us?" Hu Dequan quivered, and his expression became flustered. In this kind of confrontation between big shots, Yu Yao was just a small fry. "Hurry up and get out of the way!" Yang Ling shouted, and the cultivators of the Red Talisman Association quickly scattered. Lu Yi didn't move, because when the red and white light flew toward him, Elder Fang's anxious voice rang out in his mind. "Kid, I've already merged with her and can be considered to have completely trapped her. The rest is up to you. Open your spirit ocean." In an instant, Lu Yi saw through Elder Fang's plan. Elder Fang obviously knew about the powerful refining power of the innate skill tree, so he placed his last hope on Lu Yi. This was probably why he had saved Lu Yi at the critical moment. From his point of view, only the Dao tree bloodline could completely deal with the blood ancestors' treasured blood. No one else could. He had fought against the blood ancestors' treasured blood for countless years and had always been at a disadvantage. He had no hope of victory. Lu Ye's arrival had undoubtedly given him this opportunity. He had originally planned to wait until this battle in the Black Abyss was over before carefully formulating a plan with Lu Yi. In that plan, he was confident that he could borrow Lu Ye's strength to resolve the crisis that had plagued him for countless years. However, things didn't go as he wished. The precious blood clone had descended into the origin space. In this moment of crisis, there was no need to talk about a plan. He could only take a gamble. While saving Lu Yi, he had exposed his own aura and attracted the precious blood clone to corrode him. At this moment, not only did the origin space contain its own power, but the precious blood had also completely integrated into it. If there were no external interference, it wouldn't take long for the precious blood clone to completely corrode the origin space and allow the precious blood clone to take control of it. However, the precious blood clone didn't realize that this method had bound her hands and feet. The origin space was now like a cage, trapping her inside. If the precious blood clone had enough spiritual intelligence, she might have been able to detect some clues. However, her spiritual intelligence was still muddled, so how could she resist Elder Fang's scheme? Lu Yi had already opened his spirit sea. The next moment, he saw a ball of light fly in front of him and crash into his body. Even though Elder Fang had tried his best to control it, the powerful force was still not something Lu Yi could withstand. The moment it hit him, he felt all the bones in his body shatter. He felt dizzy and his whole body was sent flying. He was so dizzy that he almost fainted. He couldn't even feel the pain in his body. Then, Elder Fang's voice rang in his ears. "Wake up. Don't fall asleep." Lu Yi bit the tip of his tongue and barely woke up. Then, he steadied his body and checked his condition. After confirming that he wouldn't die, he hurriedly immersed himself in his consciousness. The next moment, his soul avatar appeared in his spirit sea. Looking up, a ball of red and white light was imprinted in his field of vision. It was undoubtedly the manifestation of the origin space. When Lu Yi first saw it, it was only covered with a faint layer of blood mist, but now its appearance had completely changed. Because he was in his spirit sea, Lu Yi could clearly feel that there were two powerful wills fighting in this ball of light. Red and white were constantly changing, and turbulence swept in all directions. The seawater turned into waves. Even with the suppression of the multicolored lotus blooming with multicolored light, there were some signs of it being unable to stop. "Quickly refine it." Elder Fang's voice sounded at this moment, like a shocking thunder. Lu Yi was about to activate the power of the talent tree when he suddenly realized a problem. "Elder Fang, if I refine it, what will you do?" At this moment, the blood ancestor's precious blood wasn't the only thing trapped in the origin space. If Lu Yi refined it, he could indeed refine the power of the precious blood, but in this way, the consciousness of the origin space would also be refined. It was impossible to say that Lu Yi would only refine the precious blood and not the origin space. The two were already mixed together and couldn't be separated. Elder Feng's voice sounded. I am very gratified that you can ask this question. However, there is no such thing as a perfect solution in this world. I used my body as a cage to restrain this fiend, and I don't want to fail at the last moment. Just refine it, don't worry about me. Lu Yi didn't say anything. Elder Feng knew what he was thinking and couldn't help but sigh. You should know that if the origin space is corroded by the blood ancestor's power and then escapes, the entire minuscule mountain will be plunged into misery and suffering. Moreover, as long as minuscule mountain still exists, the origin space will give birth to a new consciousness sooner or later. However, that consciousness might not be Elder Feng. Lu Ye's expression was solemn as he said in a low voice, Elder Feng, I'm sorry to offend you. As he spoke, the talent tree's phantom suddenly appeared behind his soul avatar. The towering tree's countless leaves burned fiercely. Countless roots extended from the tree's roots like living creatures, piercing into the origin space. The refining had begun. A large amount of black smoke rose from the talent tree. This was undoubtedly the power of the blood ancestor. It wasn't an impurity, but something harmful to Lu Yi. As if it had a consciousness, the precious blood's consciousness in the origin space violently resisted, causing the entire origin space to become restless. It made Lu Ye's divine sea feel as if doomsday had arrived. The seven-colored divine lotus's light became increasingly dazzling. The light was like an invisible hand, calming the turbulence in Lu Ye's divine sea and reducing the pressure on him. Within the origin space, Elder Feng was also fiercely exerting his power to suppress the precious blood. Only now did Lu Yi have the time to spare to take out some healing pills and consume them to heal the injuries on his body. Then, he took out a large number of fire-type treasures and began refining them. He secretly rejoiced that he had prepared a large number of fire-type treasures in advance. Otherwise, with such a consumption rate, the talent tree's refining might not have lasted for long. Chapter 1806. At the beginning of the refinement process, Lu Ye's deity ocean was in turmoil, and waves swept across it. Although the intelligence born from the blood ancestor's precious blood was ignorant, it was instinctive to avoid harm. The refinement of the talent tree made it sense danger, so it naturally struggled endlessly. Lu Yi couldn't suppress it with his strength alone. However, the origin will used its body as a cage, and the precious blood had tried to infect the origin will. This caused it to fuse closely with the origin will. Unless it could completely suppress the origin will, it couldn't be separated from the origin will. The reaction in the deity ocean was a direct result of the origin will and the precious blood's resistance. During the continuous refinement process, the talent tree's fuel reserves were constantly being consumed. Lu Yi could sense that there was a mysterious energy within the origin will turning into his own nutrients. The most obvious change was that he could clearly sense that his own divine nature was rapidly and terrifyingly improving. This was only natural. The blood race's divine nature originated from the blood ancestor. How terrifying was the divine nature contained within a drop of the blood ancestor's precious blood? Since ancient times, no living creature had ever had such an opportunity. But now, Lu Yi had coincidentally obtained it. His divine nature continued to improve, bringing him a deeper understanding of the blood race's secret techniques. It was as if many of the mysteries of the blood race's secret techniques had been sealed in his body since birth. As his divine nature improved, they were revealed. In the past, his divine nature was powerful enough that no blood race member in the world could compare to it. However, he had never put much thought into the blood race's secret techniques. So, even if his divine nature was powerful, there should be many blood race members who could surpass him in terms of mastery of the blood race's secret techniques. But now, things were different. Lu Yi felt that even those blood race members who had lived for countless years couldn't compare to him in terms of mastery of the blood race's secret techniques. This was a passive improvement in the process of refining the precious blood. If he spent more time on this path in the future, the effects would be even better. Day after day of refinement, the activity in the deity ocean began to decrease. Lu Yi could clearly sense that within the origin will, Elder Fong's will, and the Precious Blood's will were continuously being worn down and weakened. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. Within the origin space, Lu Yi sat cross-legged, motionless. Yang Ling stood guard at the side. He wasn't the only one. All of the surviving cultivators of the Red Talisman Association were gathered nearby. For the past 3 years, they had been stuck here. They had tried to find a way out, but unfortunately, they had found nothing. At first, they had panicked. In the past, when they were fighting against Sacred Blood Peak, they had been in a bad situation, but at least they had some freedom. But in this source space, they didn't even have freedom, and there weren't many cultivation resources. Everyone almost thought that they would be trapped here until they died. It wasn't until one day that Lu Yi, who was busy, sent a message to Hu Dequan and briefly explained the situation. Only then did everyone relax and wait here. He waited for 3 years. Until today, Lu Yi suddenly opened his eyes. The light in his eyes was a little unfocused, as if a lifetime had passed. He didn't expect that it would take him so long to refine the origin source. The reason was that he didn't have enough fuel for the talent tree. If he did not care about the consequences and used all his strength to refine it, the efficiency would be faster, but the fuel consumption of the talent tree would be greater, and there would be a lot of unnecessary waste. So he could only control the efficiency of the refinement and ensure that the talent tree could use the fuel. This way, he would spend more time. Fortunately, 3 years of hard work had paid off. Now that the talent tree's fuel had been used up, and although the blood ancestor's precious blood in the source space hadn't been completely refined, the will of the precious blood had been completely obliterated. So, there wasn't much of a problem. He only needed to replenish the talent tree's fuel and spend some more time refining it. Hu Dequan, who was at the side, faintly sensed something and looked over. He said in pleasant surprise, "Brother Lu, you're finally awake." Yang Ling also hurriedly looked over and asked anxiously, "What's the situation now?" Lu Yi was dazed for a moment before saying, "There's basically no problem." Everyone was overjoyed, their faces filled with anticipation and excitement. Hu Dequan stammered for a moment, but still couldn't help but ask, "Then, the will of the source space." Lu Yi was silent for a while before saying, "I'll open the seal of this space. Let's talk about it after we leave." The seal and opening of the source space was originally controlled by Fong Lao. Now that Fong Lao was no longer here, and Lu Yi had basically refined the source space, he could naturally control it. As he spoke, he thought of something. The cultivators of the Red Talisman Association, who had waited for 3 years, felt the world change. When they came back to their senses, they were already back in the inner world. In the next moment, ripples appeared in the void. Lu Yi stepped out, followed by the 2 remaining blood servants. "We're finally back." Yang Ling looked like he had just escaped death. He let out a long breath. Being trapped in the source space for 3 years had really suffocated him. Hu Dequan looked at the surviving cultivators of the Red Talisman Association and sighed. Before the battle 3 years ago, there were more than 40 people on their side. Now, there were only a dozen of them. Fortunately, everyone from the Saint Blood Mountain was wiped out. From now on, there would be no more opponents in the world. Soon, Hu Dequan thought of a question. "Brother Lu, can we also break the seal of this world? Can we go home now?" Whether they were sent here by the Miniman tribe or accidentally wandered into this world, they had been here for too many years. They had been fighting against the Saint Blood Mountain all this time. Now that they had won, they naturally wanted to leave as soon as possible. Lu Yi sensed for a moment and nodded, "Anytime. But please wait for a moment. I need to make some preparations." The seal of the inner world was Fong Lao's doing. He borrowed the power of the spectacle outside to isolate the attraction of the inner world to the other 3 parts of Fangsuan Mountain. If not for this, Fangsuan Mountain would have already merged into one place. However, if this was really the case, it would be a disaster for the Miniman tribe because the power of the blood ancestors' precious blood would definitely spread to the entire Fangsuan Mountain. Fong Lao's actions were to protect the Miniman tribe. Now that Lu Yi had refined the source space and controlled the power of this world, he could naturally break the seal of the inner world. "No problem. Then I'll wait for your good news." Yang Ling replied happily. The people of the Red Talisman Association left, but the Xiang sisters stayed behind to wait on him. When they thought of Zhou Ran and Wang Taixing who had died in battle, they couldn't help but feel sad. Although before Lu Ye's arrival, the sisters had fought with him from time to time, they still had a tacit understanding of the general direction. When Wang Taixing first joined Lu Yi, he only had one wish, and that was to leave this damned place before he died. He was willing to sincerely join because compared to Li Tian, he thought more highly of Lu Yi, who had a strong divine aura. Unfortunately, this wish didn't come true in the end. During the battle that day, if Lu Yi hadn't taken the risk to activate the Little Flower Realm to take them in, the sisters wouldn't have survived. After a moment, Lu Yi opened his eyes and revealed a thoughtful expression. Xianyu stepped forward. "Lord, do you have any instructions?" Lu Yi shook his head and looked in a certain direction. "There's a spirit jade mine over there. You can go and cultivate." There were no more enemies in this world, so there was no need for them to wait on him. Moreover, even if there were enemies, with Lu Ye's current special status in this world, he could suppress them with a flip of his hand. After saying that, Lu Yi leaped and disappeared into thin air. The sisters glanced at each other before flying in the direction Lu Yi indicated. Sure enough, they found the spirit jade mine. At this moment, Lu Yi had already jumped out of the inner world and arrived in the outside world. The seal of the realm could seal other cultivators, but it couldn't seal him. The surroundings were somewhat familiar, so he should be inside the illusory blood magic eye wonder. Lu Yi suddenly thought of a problem. The illusory blood magic eye wonder's name originated from the demon eye blink. According to the information he had, the demon eye blink was the manifestation of the blood ancestor's precious blood's power. Now that the blood ancestor's precious blood was gone, the demon eye blink most likely wouldn't appear in the inner world anymore. Although the inner world would still have the demon eye blink, it didn't live up to its name. Perhaps after a while, the cultivators in the inner world would be very confused as to why the demon eye blink no longer existed. However, this had nothing to do with Lu Yi anymore. He had perfectly completed the mission given to him by the humanoid race. Next, he had to follow his original plan and bring the core back to the Jade Conch Mountain. This way, the Jade Conch Mountain would have a powerful backer in a short period of time. They would no longer have to worry about any dangers erupting in the star system. However, looking at the core, which was about 100 feet long and looked like a fake mountain, Lu Yi felt a little troubled. How was he going to bring such a big thing back to the Jade Conch Mountain? After thinking about it, Lu Yi opened the Small Flower Realm and tried to use the Small Flower Realm to store it. If he succeeded, it would be convenient. However, the result disappointed Lu Yi. The Small Flower Realm couldn't store the minuscule mountain core at all. Thinking about it, it wasn't strange. The Small Flower Realm had a limit on the number of cultivators it could store. In fact, it wasn't very big. The minuscule mountain core didn't look very big, but it was still a realm. How could the Small Flower Realm contain it? If the Small Flower Realm couldn't store it, then there was no need to think about a storage ring. He couldn't possibly carry it, right? What kind of scandal was that? However, Lu Yi soon discovered that he seemed to be able to use this core as if it were a magic treasure. At the end of the day, it was still because he had refined the core's origin. Realizing this, Lu Yi felt relieved. Although it was a little ugly, as long as he could transport the core back to the Jade Conch Mountain, it wouldn't be a big problem. After planning his next move, Lu Yi already had a plan in mind. Soon, Lu Ye's voice sounded in the inner world. The realm's seal has been broken. Fellow Taoists who want to leave can leave on their own. After saying that, a figure flew into the sky. Soon, there were people following him. A moment later, all the cultivators of the Red Talisman Association appeared in front of Lu Yi. Although they had already received Lu Ye's confirmation before, they couldn't help but feel happy when they really got rid of the realm that had trapped them for many years. They felt like they had been reborn. Chapter 1807. Apart from Yang Ling and Hu Dequan, who were specially sent here by the humanoid race, the rest of the cultivators from the inner world had basically wandered in by accident. They had all come to the wonder to train themselves. Everyone had their own origins. Now that they had jumped out of the rut, they naturally would not stay. Many cultivators expressed their gratitude to Lu Yi one by one, exchanging musical notes and imprints before bidding farewell. No matter what, all of them had experienced a life and death battle together, and this wasn't an ordinary relationship. Moreover, they'd persisted in staying in the Red Talisman Association under such a situation and didn't seek refuge with Saint Blood Peak, and it was sufficient to display their character and disposition. It could be said that these cultivators who had survived would have great achievements in the future if nothing unexpected happened. Soon, most of the surviving cultivators from the Red Talisman Association had left. Lu Yi looked at Yang Ling and Hu Dequan who had stayed behind. "What are the two of you planning to do?" Yang Ling scratched his head. "I don't have any plans. I don't know where to go." They had known each other for quite some time. Lu Yi more or less knew about Yang Ling's situation. He had been adopted by the humanoid race since he was young and had also grown up in Fangsuan Mountain. Therefore, while the others could return to their own homes, he had no place to go. "Fellow Lu, now that the seal on the inner world has been broken, if we take the core away from this wonder, will the three parts of Fangsuan Mountain fuse together without the isolation of the wonder's power?" Yang Ling asked. "That's right. This is also my next plan." It was also a task given by the humanoid race. "All right then. I'll stay in the inner world and wait for Fangsuan Mountain to fuse." He came from Fangsuan Mountain in the south. To him, the south was his home. Now that he could stay here and wait to see his family, he naturally did not want to waste too much effort. "Old Hu, what about you? Do you want to go back to your homeland to take a look?" Yang Ling turned to look at Hu Dequan. Hu Dequan pondered for a moment and shook his head. "There's nothing to see. I'll accompany you." Hu Dequan's situation was different from Yang Ling's. He was not adopted by the humanoid race since he was young. However, the miniature humans had their own choices when recruiting foreign cultivators. Generally, they would not recruit cultivators with strong backgrounds because they would be difficult to control. Therefore, they only recruited those with good potential but no background. The domain that Hu Dequan was born in was only a large domain, and he did not have any foundation in his homeland. Even if he returned, after so many years, he was afraid that things would have changed. "Haha." Yang Ling laughed heartily and patted his shoulder. "All right then, let's see who can advance to sunshine first." Hearing this, Lu Yi immediately reminded them, "Gentlemen, don't try to refine any of the resources in the core region, especially the spirit jade mine." The will of the precious blood clone had been completely obliterated, but there were still remnants of the precious blood's power in the origin. All the resources in the domain had remnants of the divine nature, including the spirit jade mine. The Xiang sisters could use the spirit jade mine to cultivate, as they were first-generation blood kindred. However, Yang Ling and Hu Dequan could not, unless they wanted to be contaminated by the divine nature. This was undoubtedly not what they wanted. After all, they had persevered for so many years, and they could not break their perseverance after winning. As he spoke, Lu Yi handed over a storage ring. "It's not much. Just use it. Once I settle down, you won't be short of resources." He originally had a lot of spirit jades and spirit crystals on him, but they were all for himself. When he came to the inner world, he gave the Red Talisman Association a batch of resources. Later, he joined forces with the Red Talisman Association and shared a part of it. Now, he did not have many resources left. However, the fuel for the talent tree had been used up, and he did not plan to cultivate for the time being. Yang Ling happily took it. "We're all brothers, so I won't stand on ceremony with you." Hu Dequan poked him and whispered, "Not brothers." He did not forget that Lu Ye's cultivation companion was Su Yuqing. According to seniority, Lu Yi was his martial uncle. The two returned to the inner world. Lu Yi looked at the 10-feet-tall fake mountain in front of him, before leaping up and landing on it. With a thought, the core shot forward like an arrow from a bow. Along the way, meteorites and floating landmasses were smashed into pieces. Lu Yi had no intention of changing direction at all. He only drove the core under him like a star boat, and it was very easy to drive it. When driving the star boat, he had to at least activate his own magic power. However, he did not need to do that to drive the core. After refining the origin, Lu Yi felt as if the core had become a part of his body. Although there were still some barriers because he had not completely refined it, it did not affect him much. As for whether such an impact would damage the core, there was no need to worry at all. After all, it was a part of a starry sky treasure, and it could not be damaged so easily. Since there was no need to worry, and Lu Yi was in a hurry, he naturally pushed the core's speed to the limit that he could control. This was not the limit of speed, but the limit of Lu Yi's ability to adjust the direction when he encountered something ahead that he needed to avoid. It was not that he was afraid of damaging the core, but the road ahead was long. If he went too fast and ran into some realm, it would be a great sin. In just a few days, they were out of the wonder's range. Lu Yi had used the power of the origin to seal the core in advance. This way, even if he left the wonder with the core, the 3 parts of minuscule mountain would not immediately merge. He planned to wait until he returned to the 9 states before removing this seal. After leaving the wonder, Lu Yi focused his mind and used the Rainbow Divine Lotus to search for the passage to the Soul Race's ancestral land. Using the Soul Race's ancestral land as a transit point to return to the Jade Conch was his only way. Otherwise, he did not know how long it would take to fly like this. Moreover, Lu Yi did not know where the Jade Conch was. After searching for a while, he found nothing. This meant that there was no passage to the Soul Race's ancestral land nearby. Lu Yi was not in a hurry. He flew forward casually, feeling around from time to time. There were many passages connecting the Soul Race's ancestral land to the outside world. As long as he flew far enough, he would definitely be able to sense the location of a passage. If that did not work, he could still return to the 10,000 Elephants Sea the same way he came. Traveling like this was extremely boring. Lu Yi had to be careful at all times, and he couldn't split his attention to cultivate. Fortunately, half a month later, when he immersed his mind once more, he finally sensed a trace of a faint connection through the 7-colored Divine Lotus. As expected, there was no doubt a passage to the Soul Race's ancestral land in that direction. Lu Yi immediately steered the core in a different direction and flew in that direction. As time passed, the connection became vaguely clearer. However, the distance was still very far. Several days later, Lu Yi, who was sitting cross-legged on the core, suddenly looked into the distance. Under the enhancement of the insight spirit pattern, the scene that was imprinted in his eyes made him frown involuntarily. There was a realm in the void ahead. However, at this moment, this realm was being invaded by an external enemy. The invading force was a huge insect hive. This insect hive was floating not far outside the realm. Although the insect hive was much smaller in size, the situation in the void battlefield was extremely intense. Lu Yi could clearly see that outside the realm, countless cultivators had formed a defensive line to resist the invading insect race. Around the battlefield, who knew how many pieces of corpses were floating? This was undoubtedly a realm war, as well as an invasion. Back then, the 4-way galaxy had encountered such an invasion. If Lu Yi had not lured Dancer here, it would probably have been invaded by the insect and blood races. In the starry sky, the number of insect hives drifting around in search of invading targets was not particularly large, but it was not small either. Each of these huge insect hives was equivalent to a drifting realm. Before discovering an invading target, the insect race would rest and recuperate. Once they discovered an invading target, they would come out in full force. Generally speaking, in a realm occupied by such an insect hive, all living creatures would be wiped out. The insect race would stay in the realm for some time until all the resources in the realm were extracted before leaving. At this time, the invaded realm would be in tatters, without the slightest bit of life. Many dead stars in the starry sky came about in this way. Lu Yi did not know which star system this was, nor did he know which realm was invaded, but since he had encountered it, he did not intend to stand by and do nothing. It was fine if he did not have the ability to intervene, but the key was that he had the ability to intervene and kill the insect race. There was no mistake. He immediately changed direction and drove the core straight towards the huge insect hive. At first, the 2 sides fighting in the void did not notice anything. After all, the battle was so intense that they could not afford to be distracted. But as Lu Yi continued to approach, his whereabouts were eventually exposed. The first to discover him was a sunshine insect race member. Outside the chaotic battlefield in the void, there was another battlefield. That was where Nicho was fighting. Two Nicho from the insect race were fighting against a single human. Their strength seemed to be on par with each other. 1 against 2, the human Nicho was undoubtedly in a bad situation. But even so, it would not be so easy for Sunshine Insect race member to kill him. Just as Lu Yi was approaching the battlefield with the core, one of the two Sunshine Insect race members suddenly separated, a pair of wings on his back flapped, and flew straight towards Lu Yi. Before he even got close, a powerful spiritual energy bombarded him. Lu Yi, who was sitting cross-legged on the core, did not even make a sound. He tilted his head and fell down. Seeing this, Sunshine Insect race member could not help but coldly snort, "You overestimate yourself." Although he didn't place Lu Yi in his eyes, the core beneath Lu Ye's body surprised him. With his experience, he could tell at a glance that this core was no ordinary object. As for what it was, he had no way of knowing. But no matter what it was always right to take it first. Thinking so, he went up to the core and reached out to grab it. Lu Yi, who had already fallen on the core, suddenly opened his eyes and looked at him calmly. There was no trace of injury. Sunshine Insect race member could not help but be startled. Before he could react, a devouring force swept out and enveloped him. Then his vision blurred, and the noisy battle disappeared without a trace. He did not know why he had come to another world. When he turned his head to look around, he saw 4 figures surrounding him. When he sensed them, he was greatly surprised. These 4 people were all late-stage Moonjade Realm cultivators. End of chapter. Chapter 1808. Hikari's sudden disappearance shocked the other Zerg who was fighting with his enemy. While he was distracted, the human Hikari managed to turn the tables around. Hikari was fighting 1 against 2 just now and was in a bad situation. Now that he had turned the tables, he immediately counterattacked and entangled his enemies. Although he didn't know Lu Ye's background, nor did he know why Ri Zhao had mysteriously disappeared, but Lu Yi was indeed a human and had helped him, which made him very grateful. Hikari was unable to get away in a one-on-one fight and was very anxious. Seeing the core that looked like a fake mountain heading straight for the Zerg's nest, Hikari roared angrily, "Stop him!" The Zerg's nest was the foundation of this Zerg tribe. Naturally, it could not be lost. Many Zerg cultivators received the order and activated their power to attack Lu Yi. In an instant, spiritual power and magic power became chaotic. No one could underestimate such a concentrated attack. Lu Yi, on the other hand, remained seated at the core, not moving at all, completely ignoring the attacks coming from all directions. With a thought, a mysterious power spread out from his inner world and turned into an invisible barrier that enveloped the surrounding space. This mysterious power was the power of the inner world itself and not Lu Ye's magic power. After refining the core's origin, Lu Yi realized this. Not only could he drive the core like a planetary boat, but he could also mobilize the power of the inner world for his own use. This was a very strange experience that Lu Yi had never experienced before. If he did not have such confidence, he would not have dared to barge into the battlefield where Hikari was fighting for supremacy. The Zerg cultivators' attacks were all blocked by the invisible barrier and could not hurt Lu Yi at all. Some of the Zerg cultivators in front could not dodge in time and were directly smashed to pieces by the core. The distance between the Zerg and the Zerg's nest was quickly shortened. The huge Zerg's nest that was originally in front of them began to move. Clearly, the Zerg inside had sensed that the situation was not right and wanted to control the nest to avoid it. However, it was not easy to move such a huge Zerg nest. The Zerg could not control the inner world as easily as Lu Yi. Under the horrified gazes of countless Zerg cultivators, the core that was more than 100 feet long crashed into the huge Zerg's nest. The unparalleled speed, coupled with the impact of the bounded domain, caused a huge crater to appear before the eyes of the insect clan cultivators at the point of impact. With a crushing force, a hole was smashed through the heart of the huge hive. Who knew how many insects had died inside at that moment? That was not the end of it. Almost as soon as the inner world flew out of the hive, the terrifying impact completely exploded inside the hive. The insect nest itself wasn't too sturdy, and it couldn't withstand such an impact. The insect nest, which already had a hole in it, was torn apart by the force of the impact. Many insectoid cultivators were enraged. The humans, on the other hand, were suddenly energized. Ri Zhao, the only human, roared, "Kill!" In this war, the biggest headache for the humans was not the disparity in military strength, nor was it the disparity in the number of sunshine. It was the insectoids' continuous combat ability. Once the insectoids were heavily injured, they would quickly return to their hives to recuperate. It would not take long for them to reappear on the battlefield, brimming with energy. On the other hand, the humans did not have such convenience. As the insectoids grew stronger, the humans became more and more strained. If there were no accidents, this war was destined to end with the humans suffering a crushing defeat. Once that happened, their bounded domain would be destroyed, and all the humans within would be slaughtered to the last man. No one would have thought that in such a precarious situation, a divine soldier would descend from the heavens, riding an unknown treasure, and smash the Zerg's hive into pieces. This would undoubtedly greatly reduce the pressure on the humans in the subsequent battles. Furthermore, that uninvited guest had used some mysterious method to eliminate one of the enemy's members, Ri Zhao. Countless humans looked in Lu Ye's direction gratefully, but he was nowhere to be seen. Lu Ye was already hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, riding on the core. At this moment, the core came to a stop under his control. His body swayed, and he entered the inner world. A great battle was breaking out. The Xiang sisters, Yang Ling and Hu Dequan, the four late-stage Yu Yao, had joined forces to fight fiercely against Ri Zhao of the insectoid clan, who had been swallowed into the inner world. Under normal circumstances, the four late-stage Yu Yao would not be a match for Ri Zhao, even if they joined forces. Ri Zhao's ability was not something the Yu Yao could compare to. The Yu Yao could not break through the suppression of the divine soul alone. However, the inner world was barely able to maintain a balance on the battlefield. The Xiang sisters activated the Blood Sea technique with all their might, trapping Ri Zhao of the insectoid clan within. Yang Ling and Hu Dequan hid within, waiting for an opportunity to strike. From time to time, they would launch sneak attacks, and if they missed, they would immediately flee. In the midst of the fierce battle, Yang Ling's divine consciousness surged, and he sent a voice transmission to his companions. "What's going on? Why did Ri Zhao of the insectoid clan suddenly appear? Where did he come from? Where is Brother Lu? Explain." He had too many questions. The Battle of the Black Abyss had ended, the sacred blood mountain had been eradicated, and even the blood ancestors' treasured blood had been suppressed. He and Hu Dequan only needed to wait patiently. One day, the three divisions of Mount Fangsuan would reunite, and he would be able to see his beloved again. Who would have thought that just now he would inexplicably appear here, along with the sisters and Hu Dequan? And then, Ri Zhao of the insectoid clan appeared in front of him. And so, a muddle-headed battle broke out just like that. He was muddle-headed, but Ri Zhao of the insectoid clan was even more muddle-headed. From the perspective of the insectoids, the blood race was their natural ally. If they met in the starry sky, even if they did not drink and chat merrily, they would at least show signs of closeness. This was a deep friendship that had been forged through countless battles between the two races since ancient times. So, he simply could not understand why there was a blood race ambushing him here. He tried to communicate with the other party, but he did not get any response at all. In his frustration, he could only go all out and prepare to kill the other party first. However, just as he was about to do so, a scene that shocked him appeared. An inexplicable force descended from the unseen world, making him feel as if he was carrying a mountain. If he was not strong enough, he would have knelt on the ground, unable to move. It could be said that at this moment, he could not even unleash 60% of his peak strength. He immediately cried out in shock, "The power of heaven and earth!" Someone was controlling this world's power of heaven and earth to suppress him. This was simply inconceivable. If one wanted to control a world's power of heaven and earth, they had to become the master of that world and refine its source. It was not that there were no such cultivators in the starry sky, but they were extremely rare, and every one of them was a true realm master. He really could not understand why he was so unlucky to run into one. Even though he could only unleash 60% of his peak strength and was trapped in the Blood Sea, he was still able to fight evenly with Xiang Yin and the others, occasionally even gaining the upper hand. What he relied on was nothing more than his spiritual energy. His soul attacks were invisible and traceless, making it impossible for Xiang Yin and the others to guard against them. If this continued, once he found a flaw in their defenses, it was very likely they would be defeated one by one. Just as the 4 late-stage Yu Yao were in a terrible fix, Lu Ye's aura suddenly appeared. The 4 were overjoyed. In the next instant, the sound of a fierce battle came from the Blood Sea, accompanied by a muffled groan. The entire Blood Sea seemed to be boiling, and the powerful impact almost overwhelmed the Xiang sisters. At this time, Hikari, who was shrouded in the Blood Sea, was bewildered. He had also sensed Lu Ye's arrival and immediately recognized that this was the human Yu Yao who had suddenly barged into the battlefield, the one he wanted to get rid of. Initially, when he saw that the other party was only at the middle stage of the Yu Yao realm, he didn't think much of him. However, after that brief exchange of blows, he realized one thing. This human Yu Yao was ridiculously strong. So far, none of the Yu Yao he had met were stronger than him. Fortunately, his opponent was only a Yu Yao. If he was also a Hikari, he was afraid that he would be in deep trouble. Was he the one controlling this world's power of heaven and earth? Thoughts flashed through Hikari's mind. For a moment, he couldn't figure out what was going on. But no matter what, this Yu Yao was the most suspicious. Thus, Hikari immediately pounced towards Lu Ye's location, intending to finish him off first. Almost at the same time, Lu Yi activated his Blood Sea technique, merging his own Blood Sea with Xiang Yin's Blood Sea. In an instant, the Blood Sea became even denser. Sensing Hikari's clear killing intent, Lu Yi wielded his mountain blade and dashed away. Hikari's movement technique was unpredictable to begin with. Now that he was in the Blood Sea and had the Void Spirit runes to form, he was even more unpredictable. Hikari was instantly dumbfounded. Even though his cultivation was 1 realm higher than Lu Ye's, he still could not grasp Lu Ye's whereabouts. There was no pattern to Lu Ye's movements. Hikari often thought that he had grasped Lu Ye's position, but when he attacked, he missed. Lu Yi would take advantage of this opportunity to close in on him and slash down with his mountain blade, leaving a wound that was neither deep nor shallow. Not only that, Xiang Yin and the other 3 did not stop attacking. They followed the principle of hit and run, not giving their opponent any room or leeway to counterattack. Hikari the Zerg flew into a rage. He felt like a lone lion, with a few sneaky hyenas poking him from time to time. Faced with such a situation, he didn't have a good solution. If he was at his peak, he could easily crush a few Yu Yao. Unfortunately, he was being suppressed by the power of heaven and earth. Suppressing his anger, he calmly waited for a good opportunity. It was impossible for the enemy's attacks to be flawless. As long as he could find a flaw, he would be able to win. In other words, he could make countless mistakes, but the enemy could only make one mistake. I have the advantage. Gradually, however, he felt that something was not right. His wounds were healing very slowly. There seemed to be an extremely strange power lingering around his wounds, hindering his recovery. Even with Hikari's physique, he could not avoid it. Sore throat, feel it, hit again with *ck. How sad. I've been suffering since the beginning of August. End of chapter. Chapter 1809. What made Hikaru even more terrified was that there was an inexplicable power coming from the Blood Sea, causing his blood to flow out of his wounds. Even when he tried to use his magic to block it, he was unable to do so. The strange power of the Fang, coupled with the blood tracing technique, was a battle tactic that Lu Yi and Ma Shangxi had come up with together a few years ago. It was suitable for powerful enemies like the one before them. If they couldn't kill them in one blow, they could only wear them down slowly. The power of the Fang was the key. Without the power of the Fang, which could hinder the healing of wounds, the blood tracing technique wouldn't work. Although Ma Shangxi wasn't here, the Xiang sisters could still easily use the blood tracing technique. Hikaru's intense and sullen battle thus began. This was definitely the greatest torture he had ever encountered in his life. He clearly had the ability to kill the enemy in one blow, but he couldn't grasp the enemy's whereabouts. As time passed, Hikaru's body was in tatters. Lu Yi had inflicted countless wounds on him. It had to be said that Hikaru's physique was really strong, especially when his opponent was an insect. With Lu Ye's promotion to Yu Yao, the mountain blade that had also been upgraded to a magic weapon was sharp enough. Lu Yi had also enhanced it with the Divine Edge Spirit Mark. Even so, every slash of the blade couldn't cause any substantial damage to the enemy. At most, it would leave behind some superficial wounds. It was precisely these wounds that were neither painful nor itchy to Rizhao, but now they had become the heavy burden that crushed the enemy. After a full day of fighting, Hikaru's face had become extremely pale. His aura had also weakened greatly. He looked like an arrow at the end of its flight. He wasn't the only one like this. Other than Lu Yi, the other Yu Yao were also like this. First, this kind of battle consumed too much energy. These few Yu Yao had been tense all the time. Their magic power had been fully activated. To be able to hold on for so long was already a reflection of their strength. Second, each of them had endured more than one soul attack from Hikaru. That kind of attack was hard to resist, and it was also the thing that puzzled them the most. Under the repeated attacks, the four Yu Yao were a little dizzy and uneasy. Even their movements were much slower. Under Lu Ye's orders, the four of them had already retreated from the Blood Sea battlefield in advance to avoid being killed by the enemy. At this moment, Lu Yi was the only one left in the Sea of Blood, fighting the enemy alone. Victory was about to be decided. Lu Yi made another tentative attack. After leaving a new wound on Hikari's body, Lu Ye's expression turned solemn. He reached out his hand and grabbed the air. A slender bone blade appeared in his left hand. The bone dagger came from an insectoid he had killed in the past. That guy should be a descendant of Green Prickly Beetle. He had used the Great Windmill Secret technique on Lu Yi, but Lu Yi had perfectly broken it on the spot and killed him without knowing why. His two bone blades became Lu Ye's spoils of war. The bone blade was actually a part of the insect's body and had been tempered by the insect for countless years. It was extremely hard and sharp and was not inferior to the best magical treasures. In terms of quality, it was probably only slightly worse than the current mountain plate blade. Leaping could only weaken one Zerg Sunshine, but it could not kill him. He couldn't use Draw Lu Yi. Ever since the battle in the Black Abyss, he had been refining the origin source and hadn't nurtured the Draw Spirit Rune. At this stage, the most violent secret technique he could use was the Great Windmill. He had once used this secret technique to kill Hikari, who was affected by Dancer. History might repeat itself today. Lu Yi gently exhaled, and the boundless blood sea also rushed into his body at this moment. In the blink of an eye, the blood sea dissipated. On the surface of Lu Ye's body, blood and qi were steaming, and a faint red mist shrouded him. In a very short period of time, his blood and qi were pushed to the limit, and his magic power hummed in his body. Suddenly freed, Hikari didn't react, but soon looked weakly at Lu Yi, and his expression couldn't help but tremble. He also realized that Lu Yi was going to kill him. But soon, he showed a look of surprise, because he suddenly saw a strange blood-red mark appear between Lu Ye's eyebrows. Flower of the body? Hikari opened his eyes wide, trying to make sure he didn't see wrong. As Hikari, his experience was naturally extraordinary. He had heard some secrets about cultivation, and one of them was this flower of the body. Legend has it that cultivators who reach the peak of the constellation realm will condense the flower of the body. But he had only heard of this kind of thing and had never seen it before, so he couldn't be sure if it was true or not. In his opinion, there were many outstanding Constellation Realm cultivators in his clan, and those Constellation Realm cultivators had reached the point of no further progress, but none of them had condensed the flower of the body. He always thought this was a rumor, but who would have thought that he would see it with his own eyes one day? He suddenly understood why the strength of this human in front of him was so strong. It was because he really reached the peak of the Constellation Realm, achieving a feat that countless creatures could only dream of. A strong sense of crisis arose in his heart, and Hikari smelled the breath of death. In the face of such a crisis, he roared and used all his power to activate his soul's secret technique. This was the killing move he had been preparing for a long time, and he hadn't used it until now, just for this moment to turn the tables. At the same time, Lu Yi released his spiritual energy, and his right eye suddenly turned blood red. Amidst the blood-red light, countless complex and tiny runes appeared in his eye, making it look both strange and terrifying. The blood eye had appeared. This was the second time Lu Yi had used the blood eye spirit rune since he obtained it. The first time was a test, and it allowed him to slightly understand the mysteries of the blood eye spirit rune. It was of the same origin as the blood eye spirit rune he saw in the wonder that day. When this blood eye spirit rune was activated, it had an obvious illusory effect, mysterious and powerful. The Hikari in front of him was not the same person who was affected by Dancer's power and had his movements restricted. He was also not Blazing Heaven, who was besieged by so many Yu Yao and wanted to die. Even if Lu Yi was using the power of his inner world to suppress him, even if he looked incomparably weak, Lu Yi didn't dare to be careless when facing such an enemy. So, he used all his abilities, even pushing his strength to the limit. The appearance of the flower of the body was the most obvious sign, which meant that Lu Ye's blood qi had been pushed to the limit. On the other side, Hikari subconsciously looked into the blood-red eye. In an instant he was in a trance. It was as if he saw an indomitable giant, high above, looking down at him with one eye. It was as if he saw a blood-red moon rising into the sky, bathing in the moonlight, and the whole world was dripping with blood. In the end, he was still Hikari. Even if Lu Yi activated the blood eye spirit rune, it would only affect him for a moment. In the next instant, all the illusions in front of Hikari's eyes disappeared, but his expression changed drastically. This was because the killing move he had carefully prepared had been disturbed in that instant, showing signs of collapsing. This directly led to an extremely bad outcome. His spirit sea churned, and the power of his spirit became chaotic. It was like a spell cultivator who was about to cast a large-scale spell and was interrupted at a critical moment. The turbulence in his magic power would inevitably cause a backlash. Hikari's current situation was similar. He opened his mouth and let out a miserable cry, his face contorted in pain. He instinctively raised his hands to cover his head. When Lu Yi saw this, he didn't hesitate at all. He rushed forward and slashed down with the mountain blade. His body rotated as the mountain blade slashed down, and the bone blade rose. The first few slashes were still traceable, but after a few more slashes, there was only a violent storm of blade light that enveloped a large area. In the distance, Yang Ling and the others, who had already retreated from the battlefield, were dumbfounded. Even the Xiang sisters were no exception. Although Lu Yi had already displayed strength that exceeded his cultivation base in the battle with the Red Talisman Association, they really didn't expect that what they saw was not the whole story. This was probably Lu Ye's true strength. That terrifying killing intent and violent attack were not things that Yu Yao could withstand. Yang Ling considered himself to be one of the strongest Yu Yao. He secretly imagined that if he were to face such an attack, he wouldn't be able to last more than 2 breaths. The blade light slowly receded. Lu Yi stood on the spot, holding the blade with both hands. His blood and qi were boiling to the extreme, and the blood mist on his body was rising. With him as the center, within a radius of 100 miles, there were numerous crisscrossing ravines that were extremely shocking. Hikari the insect was nowhere to be seen. Only pieces of his corpse remained on the ground, evidence that he had once been alive. Although they had expected this, Yang Ling and the others still felt like they were in a dream when they saw this scene. Yu Yao had killed Hikari. This was such a ridiculous thing, and it was happening right under their noses. Yang Ling felt that he would never forget this scene for the rest of his life. Cracking sounds continued to ring out. Lu Yi staggered slightly. He didn't know how much of his flesh had been broken in an instant. He put away the Pan Mountain saber and bone saber, sat down cross-legged, took out a spirit pill and swallowed it. He silently recovered, his expression emotionless. Hikari the insect was not the first to die at his hands. Moreover, Hikari the insect was unable to unleash his full strength in this battle, so there was nothing to be happy about. If there was a day when he could kill Hikari with his own strength, then it would be worth celebrating. That day would come eventually, and it wouldn't be too late. A few days later, Lu Yi recovered. After exhorting Yang Ling and the others who were still healing, he leaped out of the inner world. Then, he took out his star boat and rushed back the way he came. He wanted to see the situation on the other side of the battlefield. Although he had taken away Hikari and destroyed the insect's nest, which should greatly relieve the pressure on the human cultivators in that realm, there were still some things that he had to see with his own eyes. Before Lu Yi could reach the original battlefield, a group of cultivators flew over. They were in a hurry, and their divine consciousness spread out as if they were searching for something. End of chapter. Chapter 1810. The cultivators coming toward him were not in good condition. They looked like they had been through a great battle and were in a sorry state. After seeing Lu Yi, the leader, Yu Yao, immediately came up and cupped his fists from afar. Lin Qi of Life Origin greets fellow Taoist. Lin Qi had seen Lu Yi from afar. After all, when Lu Yi drove the core into the scorching battlefield a few days ago, he sat cross-legged on the core and did not hide his figure, so many cultivators had seen him from afar. For the Life Yuan realm, one of the two insect races Rizhao was taken away, and the insect race's nest was broken. This was undoubtedly a great help. If not for this, the Life Yuan realm would have been in a terrible situation. Therefore, even if he didn't know Lu Ye's identity, he still had a grateful look on his face at this moment. This was a genuine life-saving grace. The cultivators behind him also saluted in unison. Lu Yi returned the greeting. "You Luo Lu Yi." He had wanted to investigate the situation of the battle over there, but after seeing Lin Qi and the others, he understood that there was no need to investigate anything. If the battle had not ended, these people would not have come over. From their posture, it was obvious that they were looking for him. The Life Origin realm should have one. Although he already had a guess, Lu Yi still asked. As expected, Lin Qi told him that the insectoids had retreated. The insectoids' biggest reliance was the two insectoids, Rizhao and the nest. However, one of them had mysteriously disappeared, and the nest had been smashed into pieces. They had lost their advantage. Many cultivators of the Life Origin realm fought back and killed countless insectoids. The remaining insectoid, Rizhao, saw that the situation was not good and immediately retreated. He was probably afraid of Lu Yi because his companion's disappearance was too strange. He did not dare to stay outside the Life Origin realm until he knew the whereabouts of his companion and whether he was alive or dead. Although the Life Origin realm had won this battle and saved the realm, they had suffered a great loss. Rizhao was seriously injured and was now recuperating in the realm. "I came to investigate under the orders of Uncle Master Qin Jiang. Fellow Taoist Lu, that insectoid Rizhao." Lin Qi looked at Lu Yi. The Qin Jiang he mentioned was undoubtedly Rizhao of the Life Origin realm. Lu Yi replied, "Don't worry, my friend. That insectoid Rizhao is already dead." Lin Ran and the other human cultivators were overjoyed. They hurriedly asked, "May I ask which senior helped us?" It wasn't that he looked down on Lu Yi, but it was clear that Lu Yi was only a mid-Yueyao realm cultivator. The gap between Lu Yi and Ri was too big. It was impossible for Lu Yi to have such means. Lu Yi also realized this problem, so after pondering for a moment, he replied, "Your master personally killed him." Since he couldn't say that he was the one who killed him, he might as well make up a story. Lin Qi had an expression of understanding. She looked behind Lu Yi and asked, "May I ask if your master is now?" Lu Yi opened his mouth and said, "Master was injured in a battle with the enemy and is currently recuperating. He ordered me to check on the progress of your battle." Lin Ran's expression tightened as she asked with concern, "Are your injuries serious?" "It's not that serious. If you don't mind, can you ask your master to go to the Life Origin realm to heal? In addition, Martial Uncle Qin Jiang would also like to express his gratitude in person." Lu Yi shook his head and said, "There's no need. My master's temperament is more of a loner. He's not used to interacting with others. Since the battle in your realm is over, we won't stay here any longer. Take care, fellow Taoist." Lu Yi cupped his fists and turned to leave. Lin Chi was anxious. Fellow Taoist, please wait. We can't repay such a great favor. No matter what, please let us do something. Otherwise, we won't be able to explain to Uncle Master Qin Jiang when we return. Lu Yi stopped and turned to look at him. Just as he was about to refuse, he suddenly thought of something and said, "If that's the case, then please collect some fire attribute resources and bring them over. My honored master has great use for them." He had used up all the fire-type resources on him, and even the fuel reserves of his talent tree had been used up. He had planned to replenish them in the future, but now that he had the chance, he could get some for his use. Moreover, although this battle had not consumed much of his energy, what he had consumed was the foundation of his inner world. The power to seal Hikaru came from the foundation of his inner world. This was also the reason why Lu Yi had used the Great Pinwheel Secret technique at the last moment. Sealing Hikaru had consumed a lot of the foundation of his inner world. The sooner he got rid of his opponent, the sooner this consumption would end. Otherwise, Lu Yi could have slowly killed Hikaru without taking the risk. It was very troublesome to recover the foundation of a realm. Lu Yi was only asking the life origin realm for fire-type resources. Compared to the consumption of the realm's foundation, it was nothing. Lin Chi's eyes lit up and he quickly nodded. Fellow Taoist, please wait a moment. With that said, he took out a sound talisman and sent out a message. Soon he looked at Lu Yi. The inner world will do its best to collect fire-type resources. They will be delivered in half a day. While waiting, Lin Chi and Lu Yi chatted. Lin Chi repeatedly mentioned that he wanted to pay a visit to his non-existent master and thank him in person, but Lu Yi fooled him. Lu Yi also thought of a problem. Although we won this battle, if the insectoids come back, how will you deal with them? Hikaru had not died and had escaped. It was hard to guarantee that he would not find other insectoid nests and lead them to the life origin realm. This might take a long time, but it was very likely that the day would come. Lin Chi could not help but sigh. But there is no good way to deal with it. We can only work hard and cultivate. Hopefully, when that day comes, our realm will have enough strength to protect itself. Lu Yi did not speak. He had just happened to be there and helped the life origin realm, saving them from disaster. However, they would not be so lucky next time. They would have to work hard. The insectoid and blood races were the most notorious races in the universe. Relatively speaking, the insectoid race was more dangerous than the blood race. This was related to the way the two races lived. The blood race had several realms, which were all formed by the remains of the blood ancestor after his death. They were basically fixed. Even if the blood race went on expeditions, they would only kidnap living beings and rear them to ensure the supply of blood. However, the insectoids were different. This race did not have a fixed place to cultivate. The insectoids usually used their nests as their foundation and wandered around the universe. If they encountered a target that they could invade along the way, they would start a war. However, there were exceptions to everything. Sometimes, there were also blood race members in the nests. The two races often cooperated. Half a day later, a cultivator rushed over from the life origin realm and brought a few storage rings for Lin Chi. Lin Chi checked them and handed them to Lu Yi. Fellow Taoist, can I ask your master to go to the life origin realm to heal? Lin Chi wanted to make one last effort. Lu Yi shook his head. Thank you for your kindness, fellow Taoist. We have no fixed residence and wander around. As humans, we should help our friends when they are in trouble. As for going to your realm to heal, there's no need. Master is already meditating, so it's not good to disturb him. Lin Chi sighed. Your master is righteous. I will remember this in my heart. If we meet again in the future, I will definitely repay him. See you later. Lu Yi cupped his fists, picked up the rings, and left. Lin Chi and the others watched. A moment later, Lu Yi returned to the core and sat cross-legged on it. With a thought, he drove the core and continued on his way. While traveling, he refined the fire-type resources he had obtained from the life origin realm. In a few days, he had completely refined them. After checking the talent tree, Lu Yi felt a little relieved. There was no fuel for the talent tree, which made him feel more or less uncertain. Now, he could finally breathe a sigh of relief. However, the fuel was not enough at the moment. He had not completely refined the blood ancestors' precious blood mixed in the origin. He could only think of a way in the future. At the very least, he had to settle down the core first. Another storage ring appeared in his hand. This was left behind by the insectoid Rizhao after his death. Rizhao's inheritance. Lu Yi was full of anticipation as he focused on cracking the restriction lock on the storage ring. Half a day later, when the restriction lock on the ring was broken, Lu Ye's face darkened after checking it. This was because the inheritance in the ring was worlds apart from what he had expected. There was almost nothing good in it. There were not even many spirit jades and spirit crystals. Thinking about it carefully, this was not strange. The insectoid's way of survival was destined to not leave too many resources on their bodies. The resources they obtained were basically invested in the insectoid hive. The insectoid hive could turn all the resources obtained by the insectoids into nutrients. The insectoid's cultivation, healing, and growth were all carried out in the insectoid hive. This was somewhat similar to the fuel stored in his talent tree, except that the insectoid hive stored the resources obtained by the insectoids as nutrients. Now, the nutrients accumulated by countless resources had disappeared with the destruction of the insectoid hive. Lu Yi was helpless. Moving forward, the core finally arrived at the designated location. In the void, Lu Ye's divine sense surged. With the rainbow god lotus in his divine sea, he connected to the soul race's ancestral land. As time passed, the connection grew stronger. Until a certain moment, a door suddenly opened in the void in front of him. Lu Yi drove the core and rushed in through the door. The world spun. When he came back to his senses, the familiar scenery was imprinted in his eyes. He had arrived at the soul race's ancestral land. At the same time, on the immortal spirit peak of Mount Fangsuan in the east, Su Yuqing, who was cultivating with her eyes closed, suddenly opened her eyes with a puzzled look. Because at that moment, she suddenly felt something strange. This was something she had never felt before. Not only her, but Wuxia, who was sitting on the ethereal peak and watching the rolling clouds, also looked puzzled at the same time. On the cloud sea peak, Qin Xianhai stood with his hands behind his back. He suddenly looked up at the sky and raised his eyebrows. After pondering for a moment, he suddenly rushed into the sky. Sensing Qin Xianhai's movement, Su Yuqing and Wu Qima's figures flickered as they rushed towards the sky. The three great sunshine already had a guess. As to whether this guess was true or not, they still had to verify it with their own eyes. Even as strong as the three of them, they looked excited and expectant. Because if their guess was true, it would be a joyous occasion that the hominid race had been waiting for countless years. Illness really came like a landslide. Yesterday it was just a sore throat, but in the afternoon it started with a fever. The fever lasted through the night, and when I woke up in the morning, both my eye sockets hurt. My entire body was sore and weak. I have to go to the hospital. Then, after today's update, please forgive me. End of chapter. Chapter 1811. On the way out, the three Rihos of Mount Fangtuan in the east met. They looked at each other and saw what each other was thinking. After a short while, the three of them flew out of Mount Fangtuan and into space. Turning around, Wu Qima's pupils constricted. "It stopped," he exclaimed. Su Yuqing frowned. Chen Xuanhai's expression was grave. The three of them had just noticed that something was wrong with Mount Fangtuan. They had assumed that something had happened to the core, which was why they were filled with anticipation. However, when they came out, they realized that this wasn't the case. What does this mean? Wu Qima couldn't figure it out. What he was seeing was different from what he had expected. Ever since the blood ancestor had broken Mount Fangtuan, the three divisions had been separated and the core had been lost. Since then, the three divisions of Mount Fangtuan had been using the core's location as a reference. This was why the Rihos of Mount Fangtuan had been able to figure out where the core was hidden. All these years, they had been working hard to find the core. They had even sent Yu Yao, who had been carefully nurtured by them, to that wonder. In the Rihos' minds, if someone could bring the core out of that wonder, then the three divisions of Mount Fangsuan would immediately start moving toward the core's location and merge back together. After so many years, they had all thought that Mount Fangsuan had suddenly started to move. However, what they were seeing now didn't seem to be the case. If someone had really brought the core out of the wonder, then Mount Fangsuan wouldn't have stopped moving. Instead, it would have turned around and flown toward the core. This was what Wuxia couldn't understand. Then, a hair-raising thought appeared in his mind. The core can't have been destroyed, right? If Mount Fangsuan wanted to stop, it could be controlled. Previously, Mount Fangsuan had stopped on the 10,000 manifestations sea for 2 months. However, this time couldn't have been too long. Otherwise, it would have affected Mount Fangsuan's trajectory. Now, none of the three Rihos had controlled Mount Fangsuan to stop. The fact that Mount Fangsuan had suddenly stopped made one's imagination run wild. One possibility was that the core had been destroyed, which was why Mount Fangsuan had stopped moving in the east. Chen Xianhai shook his head. Although Mount Fangsuan has been split, if the core was destroyed, the three divisions would definitely be shaken. Now that the east is peaceful, the core should be fine. Su Yuqing nodded, agreeing with Chen Xuanhai's point of view. Then what's going on? Wuxia scratched his head. He had never encountered such a strange thing in his life. Su Yuqing's eyes flashed as she said, "There's another possibility." Chen Xianhai turned to look at her. According to our analysis, the reason why the three Fangsuan mountains are unable to fuse with the core is because there is a type of isolating power in that wonder that prevents the fusion of the two. If that isolating power suddenly becomes much stronger and completely cuts off the connection between the core and the headquarters, this was because the headquarters was based on the location of the core. Now that the core was completely isolated, without this base, the headquarters Fangsuan mountains stopped moving. The spectacle has changed. Chen Xuanhai's frown deepened. If that was the case, it wouldn't be a good thing for the Minimen tribe. After all, the core was inside the wonder. Who knew if this change would be good or bad for the core? That Luya has been there for more than 3 years, right? Wuxia suddenly looked at Su Yuqing. Do you think this change has anything to do with him? No one knew the answer to this question because the Minimen tribe had no way of contacting Luya. Back then, Jianghu had left after sending Luya to the vicinity of the wonder. Because he wasn't sure if Luya had gained anything from this trip, nor was he sure how long he would stay in the wonder, Jianghu couldn't possibly wait for him forever. Su Yuqing was silent for a moment before suddenly turning to Chen Xianhai. "Senior brother Chen, I want to go and take a look." She was still a bit worried. In truth, she regretted telling Luya about the core. She hadn't expected Luya to immediately go and look for it. Chen Xianhai could roughly understand Su Yuqing's feelings and didn't try to dissuade her. Instead, he said, "Junior sister, if you really want to go, there's no need to rush. No one knows the reason behind this change, and no one can guess what will happen in the future. There's no harm in waiting a few more days and observing the situation. Perhaps you'll discover something new. If there are no changes, it won't be too late to go then." His words made sense. Su Yuqing suppressed the uneasiness in her heart and slowly nodded. Chen Xianhai raised his hand and said, "Let's go back first. Since there are changes here, the other 2 tribes should also have changes. Let's discuss it with those old fellows first." The 3 Sunshine tribes returned to the domain. Another half a day passed. In an illusory palace, illusory figures appeared one after another. They were all the spiritual projections of the Sunshine Tribe experts of Mount Fangsuan. Although the 3 tribes were divided, they were still incomparably close. If they paid a price, they could even allow the tribes to communicate freely. It was naturally not difficult to project one's spiritual consciousness to one place to discuss important matters of the tribe. Compared to meeting with one's spiritual consciousness in one place, the price to pay was much lower. Just as Chen Xianhai had predicted, not only did Mount Fangsuan in the east stop moving for a moment, the same thing also happened in the south and west. However, no one knew the specific reason. In the end, they could only conclude that the core was completely isolated, which was why there were changes in the 3 tribes of Mount Fangsuan. While the 3 Sunshine tribes were gathered for a meeting, in the ancestral land of the Soul race, Lu Yi drove the core to a 5-colored lotus land. From afar, he saw many figures moving about on the lotus land, many of whom looked familiar. These figures were the Immortal Essence Guards of Immortal Essence City. Lu Yi also saw a big white tiger, lying down and sleeping somewhere on the lotus land. Several figures were gathered around it with sincere and solemn expressions. It was unknown what kind of secret technique they were cultivating. Soul power that seemed to resonate with each other surged out from Dahu and the other figures. The big tiger, who was sleeping soundly, seemed to have sensed something. It suddenly opened its amber tiger eyes and looked in Lu Ye's direction. Then, it hurriedly got up and pounced happily at Lu Yi. It jumped high and turned into the size of a cat in midair. Lu Yi smiled and grabbed it in his hand. After rubbing it for a while, the amber tiger closed its eyes and let out a satisfied purr. After playing with it for a while, Lu Yi asked, "Where's Yi?" As soon as he asked, he saw a door appear somewhere on the lotus land. Yi's little head poked out from it, obviously sensing something. "Lu Yi!" he cried out in surprise. Just like the amber tiger, she pounced on Lu Yi and bumped into him. She wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her head in his chest. Lu Yi held onto Hu Po with one hand and her waist with the other. They spun a few rounds before slowly coming to a stop. He didn't want to let go at all. Until Li Shang's voice sounded, "Fellow Taoist Lu." Lu Yi smiled and replied, "Fellow Taoist Li Shang, long time no see." A moment later, in Yi's residence, Lu Yi looked around with his hands behind his back. The lotus land was a very strange place. From the outside, it looked like a huge blooming lotus. This was also the habitat of the soul race. The lotus lands in the soul race's ancestral land were divided into different grades depending on the color. The Sunshine Realm cultivators lived in 7-colored lotus lands, while the Yu Yao lived in 5-colored ones. Li Shang was only a star mansion back then, but she was qualified to live in a 5-colored lotus land because she had done a great deed for the soul race and brought back a sacred beast. There was no place to live on the surface of the lotus land, but because the soul race didn't have a physical body, they only needed to create the environment they needed inside the lotus land. Yi's current residence was undoubtedly created by him. The furnishings inside were no different from the Jade Blood Sect's Green Bamboo Peaks bamboo tower. Yi sat on the side, hugging Hu Po, who was the size of a cat. She tilted her head and looked at him, swinging her legs. Her eyes were filled with happiness. Lu Yi walked to her side and sat down. He patted her head and asked, "Is cultivation tiring?" He shook her head. "It's not tiring. I have Hu Po to accompany me." Lu Yi glanced at Hu Po. "It only knows how to sleep. What can it accompany you for?" Hu Po immediately howled, indicating that it was cultivating by sleeping. Besides, it was much stronger than before. "All right, I know you've become stronger." Lu Yi tapped Hu Po's head. It had to be said that Hu Po and Yi had grown tremendously over the past few years in the soul race. Lu Yi could sense that the spiritual beast and spiritual beast were not far from Yu Yao. This was undoubtedly related to the unique cultivation environment in the soul race's ancestral land. In this kind of place, the soul race had a unique advantage in cultivation. Even if they didn't work hard, their cultivation would still slowly increase. I saw several soul race cultivators surrounding Hu Po just now. What were they doing? Lu Yi asked. He immediately explained, Hu Po has taken in a few new servants. The soul race cultivators you saw were all carefully selected by the soul race. They have the most outstanding aptitudes. They have formed a symbiotic relationship with Hu Po, so they can cultivate and grow together, just like me. Lu Yi finally understood. When he recalled the resonance he felt from the soul race cultivators and Hu Po, he knew that Yi was right. Did Hu Po do this willingly, or did the soul race request it? Lu Yi asked. Yi said, the clan leader personally said it. He didn't request anything. Hu Po agreed because the more servants it takes in, the faster its strength grows. Correspondingly, my strength will also grow along with it. Lu Yi nodded. Yi could see his worry. She smiled and said, don't worry. The soul race values Hu Po very much. They won't force him to do anything he doesn't like. That's good. However, there's one thing. If you're unhappy here, tell me at any time. I'll take you away, Lu Yi said seriously. When Yi wanted to follow Li Shang to the soul race's ancestral land to cultivate, Lu Yi was actually a little reluctant to let her go. However, the child had grown up. It wasn't a bad thing to have her own opinions. Most importantly, Lu Yi knew that he didn't have much time to accompany. Today was still the first day. Yesterday, I was in a daze. I ate some porridge at night. Today, I don't have any strength at all. I'm sitting here writing, sweating all over. I still have to go to the hospital for an 4 drip. This time, the illness came with great momentum. I haven't felt this bad in many years. In the past, when I got sick, it was always a gradual process. This time, it was different. End of chapter. Chapter 1812. After staying on Li Shang's lotus continent for a few days, Lu Yi left. Yi and Hupa watched him leave. They no longer felt as sad as they did last time. After all, their feelings were different. When they left last time, Yi felt that it would be a very, very long time before she could see Lu Yi again. Naturally, she was reluctant. But now that she knew that Lu Yi could come to the soul race's ancestral land, they would have many opportunities to meet in the future. Before they left, Yi gave Lu Yi thousands of soul jades. She had worked hard to condense these soul jades while she was cultivating. Lu Yi did not refuse and accepted them happily. Soul jades were hard to find in the outside world because it was difficult to find a suitable environment for soul jades. But they were easy to find in the soul race's ancestral land because there was pure soul energy everywhere. However, most soul race clansmen would not condense soul jades because they could refine soul energy to cultivate if they needed it. It was a waste of time to do so. Yi had prepared these soul jades especially for Lu Yi. Perhaps Li Shang had contributed some of them as well. In front of the 7-colored lotus continent where the starry pond was, Lu Yi had just arrived when he saw Elder Su Yuan's figure in the distance. In reality, when Lu Yi entered the soul race's ancestral land, Su Yuan, who was responsible for guarding the starry pond, had sensed him. But Lu Yi had gone to Li Shang's lotus continent first, so Su Yuan did not disturb him and waited here. Elder! Lu Yi leapt down from the core and saluted. Su Yuan nodded slightly and came forward. He looked at the core with interest, his expression uncertain. After a long time, Su Yuan asked, "Boy, is this a small world?" However, it seemed to be somewhat different from the small worlds that he knew. To call it a small world, it was undoubtedly too big. Generally speaking, small worlds could be carried around. For example, Lu Ye's Little Flower Realm could also be considered a small world. The treasure that Bansi had taken in Bangsio was also a small world. But Su Yuan had never seen such a big small world. Its shape was also quite strange. Facing Su Yuan, Lu Yi did not hide and said directly, "It is not wrong to call it a small world, but it is different from ordinary small worlds. It is the core of minuscule mountain." Su Yuan turned to look at Lu Yi with shock. Minuscule mountain? The minuscule mountain of the human race? That's right. Lu Yi nodded. Su Yuan became even more interested. He walked around the core and observed it. After a while, he said, "Back then, the blood ancestor wanted to encroach on the Fangsuan mountain. He led the blood race under his command and attacked. After a great battle, both sides suffered great losses. The Fangsuan mountain was broken and divided into 3 parts. The core was lost, and its whereabouts are unknown." Lu Yi explained, "Actually, the little humans have always known the location of the core. They have been trying to find it for many years, but due to some reasons, they were unable to do so. I was asked by Rizhao of the little humans to explore it, and I finally found something." "You have a good relationship with the humanoid tribe?" Su Yuan looked at him in surprise. If he could give such an important task as searching for the core to an outsider, their relationship couldn't be bad. "Not bad." Lu Yi rubbed his nose. He couldn't possibly say that he and Rizhao of the dwarf clan were Dao companions. That would be too shocking. Su Yuan looked at him and chuckled. "You have good social skills." Lu Yi could be considered half of the soul race, but now he had a close relationship with the little humans. Whether it was the soul race or the little humans, It wasn't easy to come into contact with them, especially the soul race. Ordinary people didn't even know where the soul race's ancestral land was, and it was impossible to find it. Lu Yi thought about it. He did seem to have a good relationship with several races. Not to mention the soul race and the little humans, there was also the mermaid race in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, which was the most reliable ally of the three-world island. There was also the flower race in the 9 states. If I treat others with sincerity, others will naturally treat me with sincerity. Su Yuan nodded, agreeing with his words. Elder, have you seen the blood ancestor? Lu Yi asked. Su Yuan shook his head and said, I haven't. The blood ancestor was active a long time ago. I didn't exist back then. Moreover, you know the situation of the soul race. We usually don't have much interaction with the outside world. Why would the blood ancestor target the little humans? Su Yuan waved his hand and said, You're mistaken. The blood ancestor isn't targeting the little humans. She wants Minuscule Mountain. It's just that the little humans were born in Minuscule Mountain, so they were affected. I heard that in that era, the insectoids were also enslaved by her. You should know the way the insectoids go about their conquest. Usually, their insectoid nests will wander around, searching for a target domain that they can invade. However, things like insectoid nests are still rather fragile. If there are experts targeting them, they can be easily destroyed. But what if we place the insectoid nests within Mount Fengxun? Lu Yi was enlightened. The insect race and Minuscule Mountain were an impeccable combination. Just think about it, the insect race was able to control a supreme treasure like Minuscule Mountain, drifting through the cosmos. If the blood progenitor had really taken Minuscule Mountain back then, the insect race would have been many times more dangerous than they were today. Moreover, Lu Yi finally understood why the insect race and the blood race had a good relationship. It turned out that they had both served the blood ancestor. It seemed that the blood race wasn't the only one involved in the war on Minuscule Mountain. The insect race was also involved. How did the blood ancestor die? Lu Yi asked again. According to Lu Ye's speculation, the blood ancestor's strength was probably not as simple as Rizhao's. How could such a powerful existence be defeated by someone else? Moreover, he was dismembered. Su Yuan shook his head. This old man doesn't know how the blood ancestor died, but kid, this world is not as simple as you think it is. There are some things that can only be discovered when you have enough strength. For cultivators, being weak is the greatest sin. After chatting with Su Yuan for a while, Lu Yi drove the core to the starry sky pond. Elder, can I take the core through the passage? Lu Yi asked. He had always been a loner. Although the core wasn't very big, it was still more than 100 feet long. Lu Yi wasn't sure if he could take the core through the passage and return to the Jade Snail Galaxy. If he couldn't, then he would be in big trouble. At that time, he could only choose to leave the core in the soul race's ancestral land and find a way to inform the humanoid race so that they could take the core away. It's not a big problem. Su Yuan's expression was indifferent. You just need to use your power to envelop the core when you pass through. Lu Yi understood and immediately began to locate the jade snail in the starry sky pond. He had used the starry sky pond to travel to and from the Jade Snail Galaxy several times, so he was naturally familiar with the process and quickly found something. Elder, I'll be going then. After saying this to Su Yuan, Lu Yi used his power to envelop the core and plunged into the starry sky pond. The scene of a starry sky that had shrunk countless times rushing towards him was incomparably shocking no matter how many times he saw it. The star field that belonged to the Jade Snail Galaxy was constantly magnified in his field of vision. By the time Lu Yi regained his senses, he had already arrived at the Jade Snail Galaxy. After identifying the direction, Lu Yi drove the core and flew towards the 9 states. Eastern Minuscule Mountain. Due to the previous incidents, the 3 Rizhao didn't cultivate. Instead, they constantly sensed the movements of the headquarters in anticipation of some changes. Unfortunately, the headquarters of the Minuscule Mountain had remained somewhere in the starry sky without any signs of movement. Only now did it finally move. What made Su Yuqing and the others extremely surprised was that the trajectory of the Minuscule Mountain had suddenly changed greatly. The three of them immediately gathered together. After a simple discussion, they came to a conclusion. The location of the core had changed greatly. That was why the trajectory of the minuscule mountain had changed as well. First, the core was completely isolated by some mysterious power, causing the three divisions of the minuscule mountain to stop drifting. In just a few days, the location of the core had changed greatly. All these strange things were really confusing. No one knew what was going on. Even so, the Rizhao of the Miniman clan were extremely excited and expectant. This was because if the location of the core had changed greatly, it was very likely that the core had already left the wonder of the illusory blood magic eye. This change was undoubtedly a good sign. As for the exact location of the core now, the minuscule mountain had no way of knowing. They had to observe the trajectory of the three divisions of the minuscule mountain for decades to 100 years before they could make a comprehensive deduction. This wasn't something that could be solved in a short period of time. Therefore, the three Rizhao quickly gathered together again to discuss the important matter of deducing the location of the core. At this time, not only was Lu Yi at the core, but Xiang Yin, Yang Ling, and Hu Dequan were also there. Looking at the domain in front of them, Xiang Yin said excitedly, "My lord, is that your domain?" "The domain I was born in is not my domain," Lu Yi replied. Xiang Yin and the others had been in the core world all this time. Now that they were about to reach the 9 states, it was naturally inappropriate to let them stay there. It wasn't difficult to settle them down. Xiang Yin and Xiang Yin were his blood servants. They didn't dare to disobey Lu Ye's orders. They could stay in the 9 states for the time being. As for Yang Ling and Hu Dequan, the two of them could also stay in the 9 states and wait for the 3 divisions of the minuscule mountain to merge. When that day came, they would be able to meet their Dao companions again. Moreover, the 4 of them were at the late stage of the Moon Jade realm. They were quite strong and could protect the 9 states if they stayed here. Many dangers in the starry sky came suddenly. For example, the descent of the filth race and the invasion of the insect nest on the way. The 9 states had been safe for so many years because of Little Nine's concealment ability and Jade Conk's remote location. However, there was always a possibility, so they still had to take some precautions. It would take too long to wait for the native cultivators of the 9 states to grow up. If anything happened during this time, the 9 states couldn't bear it. Therefore, Lu Yi had the idea of using the dwarf race as his backer. Now that he had brought back the core of the minuscule mountain, the merged minuscule mountain would become the strongest backer of the 9 states in the future. They wouldn't have to worry about any external invasion. In a few days, they had reached the outer space of the 9 states. End of chapter. Chapter 1813. On the core, Lu Yi sighed. In the past, at this time, Little Nine would have taken the initiative to contact him, but this time, there was no message from Little Nine. He didn't think that anything had happened to Little Nine. If something had happened to Little Nine, then 9 provinces would not be peaceful. Little Nine was probably addicted to the company of Little Huanyang now, but this was a good thing. At least Little Nine would not be lonely anymore. Soon, he arrived at the side of 9 provinces. As usual, Lu Ye's whereabouts were immediately investigated by the 9 provinces' constellations who were patrolling nearby. When they saw that it was Lu Yi, they immediately let down their guard and continued patrolling after greeting him. At first, when Lu Yi returned from the 10,000 Elephant Sea, the constellations of 9 provinces were very excited and expectant. But as he left and returned more and more often, everyone was used to it. For constellations like them, cultivating and becoming stronger was always the most important task. Since 9 provinces did not have their own spirit jade veins, they could only go deep into the starry sky to search for spirit jade. After accumulating a certain amount, they would refine it and turn it into nutrients for their own growth. It was not surprising that the core stopped and looked at it from afar. If there were cultivators who did not know the truth and encountered the core in the starry sky, they would not even look at it because there were too many such things in the starry sky. But it was the core of Minuscule Mountain. In order to find this core, the 3 divisions of Minuscule Mountain had worked hard for countless years. Finally, the dust settled today. Looking down at the core under his feet, Lu Ye's mind moved slightly and he gently stomped his feet. The core trembled slightly and a strange power spread out, as if some seal had been broken. The seal had indeed been broken. Before Lu Ye took the core out of the wonder of illusory blood demon pupil, he used his identity as the master of the source to place a layer of seal on the core. This layer of seal only had one function, which was to create a similar isolation force to the wonder, preventing the 3 divisions of minuscule mountain from fusing with the core. The reason why he did this was because he considered the changes in his journey. If he did not place the seal, the moment Lu Ye took the core out of the wonder, the 3 divisions of minuscule mountain would fuse toward the core. This was undoubtedly not conducive to the stability of minuscule mountain. Only now, when he returned to 9 provinces, did Lu Ye remove this layer of seal. Although he could not see the current state of the 3 divisions of minuscule mountain, Lu Ye still expected that it would be a long wait. The 3 divisions of Mount Fangsuan were very far away from the core. It wouldn't take a day or 2 for them to fuse together. Almost at the same time that Lu Ye removed the seal on minuscule mountain, the many sunshine projections in the illusory hall changed. More than half of them instantly vanished without a trace, and although the rest could still be maintained, they were all distorted to varying degrees. This abnormal situation was undoubtedly caused by the Fangsuan mountains of the various divisions trembling violently. Their true bodies were in the various divisions, and their spiritual projections were here. The Fangsuan mountains of the headquarters were trembling violently, and this caused their projections to be affected. After a while, the many figures that had disappeared gathered once again. A Rizhao from the south shouted, "Everyone, just now, our headquarters, Mount Fangsuan, suddenly changed its direction again. It's heading straight towards a certain direction at an unprecedented speed." In the east, Chen Xianhai added, "It's the same for the east." The 2 Rizhao tribes looked towards the west. Zhang Kuan from the west said, "It's the same for the west." When he finished speaking, the group of Rizhao tribes all felt excitement and anticipation from their spiritual fluctuations. They realized that the critical moment that would change the fate of Mount Fangsuan seemed to have arrived. A few days ago, there was a sudden huge change in the movement trajectory of the 3 divisions of Mount Fangsuan. From this, they deduced that there should be a huge change in the location of the core, which caused the movement trajectory of the 3 divisions of Mount Fangsuan to change. They had gathered here to discuss how to deduce the exact location of the core. Who would have thought that before they could come to a conclusion, another change would occur? And this time, it was obviously different from the previous time. Not only did the movement trajectory change, but the movement speed of Mount Fangsuan also changed. It was as if the 3 divisions of Mount Fangsuan were being pulled by some kind of force. This was something that had never happened before, and they couldn't help but let their imaginations run wild. Let's deduce it. Let's see if there will be an intersection if the 3 divisions are moving in the same direction. If there is one, a Rizhao tribe said seriously. He didn't finish his sentence, but everyone knew what it meant for the humanoid tribe if there was an intersection between the 3 divisions of Mount Fangsuan. This concerned the future of the humanoid tribe, and many Rizhao tribes had no objections. They immediately started to deduce. The various divisions of Mount Fangsuan had been drifting in the universe for so long, and their understanding of the universe could be said to be incomparable to that of any other race. They basically had the star charts of all the major galaxies. According to the current location and the movement direction of Mount Fangsuan, they could easily deduce which galaxy the headquarters would pass through in the next few decades. There might be some errors, but they wouldn't be too big. Rizhao tribe's projections constantly disappeared and reappeared. The group of Rizhao tribes busied themselves for half a day, and the 3 divisions of Mount Fangsuan's movement trajectory were gradually deduced. The 3 routes were placed together, and everyone focused on them. Their gazes quickly converged on an intersection point. Jade Conch Galaxy. Su Yuqing's eyes lit up as she murmured. From the information they had, if the 3 divisions of Mount Fangsuan didn't change their direction, they would pass through this Jade Conch Galaxy sooner or later. And Jade Conch, she was all too familiar with this name. The core is here? Rizhao tribe asked. This Jade Conch? Who knows about it? Rizhao tribe asked. There were countless galaxies in the universe, and even Rizhao tribe didn't dare to say that they knew every galaxy like the back of their hand. Most of them knew about the more famous galaxies, and this jade conch sounded like a relatively weak one. Naturally, they wouldn't pay attention to it. Even Wuxia and Chen Xianhai were deep in thought. Mount Fangzun in the east had passed through jade conch before, but they didn't know about it, so naturally, they hadn't heard of it. Only Su Yuqing spoke slowly. Jade conch is the galaxy where Lu Yi was born. The group of Rizhao tribes immediately looked over, and one of them said in surprise, Lu Yi is junior sister's little Dao partner? As soon as he finished speaking, another Rizhao tribe slapped his soul projection away. Although it was no secret that Su Yuqing had found a young Dao partner in the east, and Su Yuqing herself didn't deny it, no one mentioned it in front of her. They were all Rizhao tribes, and they all cared about their reputation. If it were a man, it would be fine if he was an old cow eating young grass. The key point was that Su Yuqing was a woman. Yes. Su Yuqing's expression was normal. The domain he was born in is called Jutian. Jutian realm is in Jade Conch Galaxy, and what? Back then, when he came to the eastern regions from the 10,000 Elephant Sea, I mentioned the matter of the core to him. He once asked me if he could place the core near the 9 heavens after finding it. That way, the Fangzuan mountain would be able to fuse there. This kid, cough cough, junior brother Lu wants Mount Fangzuan to protect Jutian? Rizhao tribe sensed Lu Ye's intention. That should be his intention. As far as I know, Jutian has just become a large domain. Its foundation is still very weak, Su Yuqing replied. The Rizhao tribes were silent. After a while, Zhang Kuan slapped his thigh. Good kid, he really did it. The matter was clear now. Lu Yi found the core and brought it back to Jade Conch. That was why the 3 tribes of Mount Fangzuan were headed in Jade Conch's direction under the guidance of the core. To Zhang Kuan, who had personally sent Lu Yi over, this was simply inconceivable. Since ancient times, the lesser human tribe had sent far too many Yu Yao from other tribes to search for cores. Many of them had been nurtured by the lesser human tribe with a tremendous amount of effort. But so far, no one had succeeded. They either never returned, no one knew if they were dead or alive, or returned empty-handed without seeing the core at all. So many years, so many people's efforts had yielded no results, and Lu Yi had only been gone for a few years? It had only been 3 years, and he had found the core. No matter what, this was a joyous occasion for the hominin tribe. The 3 tribes had been waiting for this moment for many years. They had looked forward to it again and again, but were disappointed again and again. No one had expected this pleasant surprise to come so suddenly. It left them, Rizhao tribe, at a loss for what to do. Junior sister's eye for a son-in-law is truly outstanding. Rizhao tribe couldn't help but praise. Regardless of whether Lu Yi was an old cow eating young grass or his potential and cultivation, just helping the hominin tribe find the core was a heaven-shaking contribution. Even if Lu Yi was a good-for-nothing, the hominin tribe would still take good care of him in the future. A Rizhao tribe member in the west chuckled and said, "You may not know this, but our junior brother Lu is quite famous in the 10,000 Creation Sea. He has led a group of cultivators to occupy the 3-world island, which is a high-class spiritual island. He has also led his men to occupy another high-class spiritual island. In that battle, the enemy Yu Yao were all killed. Even Rizhao tribe's guard tribe tried to stop him, but he was ruthlessly slapped in the face by Lu Yi. When the Rizhao tribe members heard this, they couldn't help but look surprised. They more or less knew what it meant to occupy a high-class spiritual island in a place like the 10,000 Creation Sea. Generally speaking, high-class spiritual islands were the exclusive property of the top forces. Without some means and ability, it was impossible to occupy them. Even if one occupied them, it wouldn't last long. Not to mention occupying another high-class spiritual island by force. This was countless times more difficult than simply occupying a high-class spiritual island. Lu Ye's side had not only occupied a high-class spiritual island, but had also attacked another one? The Rizhao tribe members suddenly realized that they seemed to have underestimated this cheap junior brother's ability. Otherwise, how could he have done something that no one had done for so many years in just 3 years? This was undoubtedly the embodiment of his own strength. Congratulations, junior sister, for finding such a good son-in-law. You have made a great contribution to our tribe. When the three tribes merge in the future, junior sister will have to recommend junior brother Lu to us. A wave of praises sounded. Su Yuqing smiled reservedly, her face full of pride. Her heart, which had been in suspense for 3 years, was now completely at ease. End of chapter. Chapter 1814. Based on the current information, the lesser human race's long-lost core had been brought out of the wonder by Lu Yi and placed in the Jade Conch galaxy. That was why the 3 minuscule mountains' trajectories had changed so drastically, moving toward a single intersection point. However, this was only the deduction of the dwarf clan's Rizhao. No one could be sure until they saw it with their own eyes. While they were excited, a Rizhao in the south said, "Which one of us is closer to the Jade Conch? This is an important matter. We should go and verify it." All the Rizhao nodded in agreement. Su Yuqing said, "I'll go to the east. More than 10 years ago, I passed by the Jade Conch galaxy in the east. We're the closest. If I hurry, I can return to the Jade Conch in 3 to 5 months." Chen Xianhai added, "I'll go with junior sister." Even Rizhao would consume a lot of energy if he traveled at full speed. He couldn't maintain it for 3 to 5 months. If the two of them traveled together, they could take turns. Chen Xianhai also wanted to go to the Jade Conch to see for himself whether the core had been brought back by Lu Yi. This was the top priority of the dwarf clan for countless years. "Then I'll have to trouble the two of you." The rest of the Rizhao had no objections. After the discussion was settled, the projections quickly dispersed. A moment later, 2 figures from the eastern Fangsuan mountain rushed into the sky. After flying out of the boundary, they turned into streams of light and rushed towards the Jade Conch. Rizhao's speed was so fast that even the Fangsuan mountain couldn't compare with him. If not, Su Yuqing wouldn't have said that she would return to the Jade Conch in 3 to 5 months. It should be known that the eastern Fangsuan mountain passed by the Jade Conch more than 10 years ago. In other words, if she rushed at full speed, she could complete the journey of the Fangsuan mountain in 3 to 5 months. On the ethereal peak, Wu Qima sighed with his hands behind his back. He also wanted to go to the Jade Conch galaxy to see the situation, but Chen Xianhai and Su Yuqing had left. He had to stay behind to look after the Jade Conch galaxy. In the 9 prefectures, Lu Yi returned after settling down the core of the Fangsuan mountain. He didn't go to the Jade Blood sect. Instead, he went directly to the Guardian Hall in the Heaven continent. He found the current guardian of the 9 prefectures and had a face-to-face meeting with him. Soon, a message was spread through the Guardian Hall. Lu Yi placed something that looked like a fake mountain near the 9 prefectures. No cultivators were allowed to approach it. Also, for cultivators from Yuyao had come to this realm. If anyone encountered them by chance, there was no need to panic. The core had been restricted by Lu Yi, so it didn't matter even if the cultivators of the 9 regions approached it. They couldn't break Lu Ye's restriction and enter the core world, but it was always right to be careful. As for the 4 Yuyao, they were naturally the Xiang sisters, Yang Ling, and Hu Dequan. Although Yuyao hadn't been born in the land of the 9 prefectures, they weren't unfamiliar with Yuyao. This was because Yuyao had been born in the flower world. After the flower world had attached itself to the land of the 9 prefectures and obtained great benefits, Hua Qianying had been promoted to Yuyao. There was also Patriarch Mu He of the Wood Spirits and Patriarch Black Umbrella of the Spore race. Both of them were Yuyao cultivators. They had traveled the 9 provinces before and had interacted with many cultivators of the 9 provinces. Lu Yi finally met Little 9. Little Huanyang blindly followed behind Little Jiao, like Little Jiao's tail. Her 2 big watery eyes revealed ignorance and naivety. After chatting with Little 9 for a while and confirming that nothing had happened in the 9 provinces recently, Lu Yi sent it off to play with Little Huanyang. Lu Yi hurriedly rushed out of the 9 provinces and returned to the core world. Xiang Yin and the others were still there. 4 pairs of eyes were staring at the blood-refining realm near the 9 prefectures in shock. From their point of view, the blood-refining realm's appearance was too shocking. It looked like a giant creature that had its head and limbs chopped off. Seeing Lu Yi return, Xiang Yin turned to look at him. "Lord, what's the situation in that realm? My sister and I felt that something was calling out to us." They had also told Yang Ling and Hu Dequan about this, but unfortunately, Yang Ling and Hu Dequan didn't feel the same way. This made Xiang Yin guess. Lu Yi glanced at the blood-refining realm and explained, "It's a place called the blood-refining realm formed by the remains of the blood ancestor. Don't go near it." Ma Shangxi had a similar feeling when he saw the blood-refining realm. He vaguely felt that the opportunity for him to break through to the sunshine realm lay in the blood-refining realm. He wanted to ask Lu Yi to let him go there, but Lu Yi heartlessly refused, which made Ma Shangxi very sad. Xiang Yin and Ma Shangxi were both blood race, and they were all blood race with divine nature. It wasn't strange for them to have similar feelings in front of the remains of the blood ancestor. Lu Yi had refused Ma Shangxi mainly because of the difference in strength between them. They were both Yu Yao, so Lu Yi was confident that he could control Ma Shangxi, a blood warrior, with his precious blood. However, no one knew what would happen if a blood warrior's cultivation broke through to the sunshine realm. Xiang Yin and Xiang Yin's strength wasn't much worse than Ma Shangxi's, so Lu Yi naturally wouldn't let them go to the blood-refining realm. Even if he wanted to go, now was not the time. "I'm going out for a few months. During my absence, you two guard the core world. No one is allowed to approach it," Lu Yi ordered. Xiang Yin accepted the order. Xian Yu nodded. Lu Yi then looked at Yang Ling and Hu Dequan. "You two can do as you please. The core world has already been settled, but it will take some time for the 3 divisions of minuscule mountain to merge." Yang Ling chuckled. "We can afford to wait." They had been trapped in the core world for so many years. Now that the dust had settled, minuscule mountain must be on its way to merge. What couldn't they afford to wait? The 9 prefectures was a good place. The 2 of them could find a place to cultivate and relax after completing their mission. After making arrangements for the 9 prefectures, Lu Yi left. He had to return to the 10,000 Elephant Sea to replenish the fuel for his talent tree. Although he had obtained a batch of fire-type resources from the life origin realm, what he was going to do next would consume a lot of fuel for his talent tree. The 10,000 Elephant Sea was the place to replenish the fuel. About 10 days later, Lu Yi returned to the passage leading to the Soul Race's ancestral land. He went through the starry sky pool and arrived at the Blue Moon Galaxy. Another 10 days later, he arrived at the insect passage connecting the Blue Moon Galaxy and the 10,000 Elephant Galaxy. Yu Yao was an old acquaintance of Lu Yi. After all, Lu Yi had used this insect passage several times. Moreover, as the 3rd island master of the 3-world island, he had led an army to defeat the Baiyue Island. Lu Yi was not a nobody on the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Yu Yao was undoubtedly very surprised to see Lu Yi suddenly appear. This was because she had no record of Lu Yi coming from the 10,000 Elephant Sea. She did not know how he had entered the 10,000 Elephant Sea from their galaxy. However, this was not a big deal. There were many routes in the universe. Sometimes, one would leave from one place and return from another. After exchanging a few words with Lu Yi, he happily let them pass. After more than 3 years, Lu Yi passed through the insect passage and returned to the 10,000 Elephant Galaxy. Several days later, in the bustling 3-world island, Lu Yi was activating his talent tree to refine all kinds of fire-type resources and replenishing his fuel reserves. Wan Xiao stood in front of him, holding a jade scroll and talking endlessly. Lu Yi could not help but sigh. "Senior sister, you and old Tang can take care of everything on the island. You don't have to tell me so much." Wan Xiao scolded. "The 3-world island is the 3-world island. This is a spiritual island shared by all of the 3 worlds. The accounting is the most serious problem. Our 3-world island has developed very well in your absence. You should know how much spirit jades we've earned and how much we've spent." The 3-world island had developed better and better in Lu Ye's absence. When he had left, the 3-world island had been thriving. Later, a group of hominins had settled down and opened a talisman shop on the 3-world island. This was the only talisman shop of the hominins on the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Just this name alone was enough to attract people. If they could get their hands on 1 or 2 purple talismans, they could definitely use them as a trump card. Now, the busiest place on the Three-World Island was not the Three-World Pill Shop or the Rainbow Chamber of Commerce's branch. It was the area where the talisman shop of the hominins was located. Every day, a large number of cultivators would line up to buy talismans from the hominins, but the supply still could not meet the demand. The hominin cultivators on the Three-World Island were both happy and frustrated. They were happy because it was too easy to earn spirit jades here, but they were frustrated because their lives were miserable. If they were not refining talismans every day, they were on the road to refining talismans. The storage of spirit jades on the Three-World Island had reached more than 1 billion. Now, in the entire 10,000 Elephant Sea, the Three-World Island's cultivators were treated the best. With abundant cultivation resources, other than completing their own missions, the Three-World Islands cultivators were working hard on their cultivation. The strength of the constellations on the 9 states side had generally improved. Many constellations from the Green Li Dao world and the Jade Conch world even showed signs of advancing to Yuyao. This was especially so for the cultivators from the Jade Conch world. 3 constellations had already advanced to Yuyao, which was really worth celebrating. No matter how many Yuyao there were, only the registered 5 could participate in the Battle of the Spiritual Islands. However, the increase in the number of Yuyao on the island was also a reflection of the island's foundation. The level of Yuyao had always been the awkward part of the 9 states. Now, other than Lu Yi, there was no other Yuyao in the 9 states. That was why Luan Xiaoa had come to Lu Ye's side to nag. The Three-World Island was able to establish itself because of Lu Yi. The Three-World Island's cultivators could now have such a good cultivation environment because of Lu Ye's efforts. Naturally, Lu Yi had to know about the accounts. Lu Yi blinked and looked at Luan Xiaoa, but her hands did not stop refining the resources. I know now. Luan Xiaoa sighed. I knew you would have this attitude. If you have time in the future, you should pay more attention. Lu Yi nodded repeatedly. I understand. Luan Xiaoa left helplessly. Suddenly, she stopped and turned to look at Lu Yi. When you return to the Jade Conch world, bring back a batch of resources. Okay. Lu Yi agreed. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival, everyone. My head hurts from coughing. It'll take me 10 days to half a month to recover. It's really difficult. End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.